everyone, creating accessible digital marketing assets. And leading this call today is going to be Cara Weese and Katy Hege. And Cara, you can take it away.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. I am Cara Weese, and I am a CRM and marketing automation strategist here at Serconte. My colleague Katy, who I'm going to introduce for herself, is the front-end developer also here at Serconte. If you want to go ahead. So today we want to talk to you about the ADA guidelines, specifically how they apply to digital marketing and achieve email accessibility. This slide deck is going to be full of resources, and we're also going to be walking through everything. Michelle shared this in chat, but everything will be shared with you. I want to give a special thanks to our sponsors. Without them, this wouldn't be possible, so thank you to everyone. All right, let's kick this off. So why does accessibility matter, right? At the core for me, this is a very personal thing. I am legally blind in one eye and partially blind in the other. And so I am one of those billion people, that 15% that has a disability. And when I get online, I have a lot of accommodations that I use personally to make my experience better, not just for my work, but in everyday life too. I do get emails for marketing. I'm very exposed as well. And I want to be able to participate in the world just like everybody else does. 36 million of the world's workforce is currently disabled. And in the US, that's 1 in 4 adults have some type of disability. Any type of disability falls under mobility, cognition, independent living, hearing, vision, and self-care. Of the 43 million struggling with a disability, there are those that are visual impairments. So 43 million with visual impairments and use assistance when they're online. This can include screen readers, magnifiers, and navigation assistants. I personally like to use screen readers a little bit, but magnifiers are really my go-to. Navigation assistants are also really helpful. And ultimately, accessibility matters because you want to meet every need of every customer that you're working with. If I can't read an email or I don't like your ad because it's flashing at me, I'm not going to participate. I'm going to skip over it. And that's a large portion of who you're marketing to could potentially be having this type of a disability. All right. So what is the Americans with Disabilities Act? This is referred to as the ADA. And specifically, the rules that apply to marketing is this piece here. Discrimination against individuals with disabilities persists in such critical areas as employment, housing, public accommodations, education, transportation, communication. That is going to be the key part here. They do consider that technology. Recreation, institutionalization, health services, voting, and access to public services. So accommodating anybody across the board with a disability. And again, communication does fall under electronic communication. The Web Content and Accessibility Guidelines is a worldwide organization. So this is outside of the ADA, but very similar. And they actually provide worldwide standards and expectations. These list out legal provocation and to make sure that you're following it. So you have perceivable actions. These perceivable standards are the bare minimum that you need to follow in order to be within the legal ramifications. The should list is this will make you a whole lot better of a person as a marketer and spread that significance across the board. And the may want to is the ultimate. So the ultimate level of accommodation there. Again, perceivable is that bare minimum to be legal. All right, let's dive in here. So how do you actually make changes to your marketing? Let's talk. Color contrast is going to be key here. Anything that's easier to read text when there's high contrast. So light text on dark background or dark text on light backgrounds. Your poor color contrast, you can see there on the bottom. I personally can't even read that if I wanted to, right? I can't. I don't know who can really, but there are people that do this. And so really focusing on good color contrast, very key here. Font sizes. Worldwide, it is actually recommended and preferred, not just by those of us with disabilities, but general public, that 16-point font is the preferred font. A 20 font, that's really nice for me, right? That's helpful. But even that is a little large. If you have a lot of copy on a page, I would default for that 16-point font as much as possible. Again, 16-point is the recommended size worldwide for anybody. Finally, text and imagery. This is really important. Earlier on, I talked a little bit about screen readers. A screen reader cannot read text that's part of an image. So if this was all in one piece and you're reading the text, a screen reader is going to go right over it. They would completely miss this message. Also, you want to make sure it's dark text on the background. That makes it a lot more easy to read. So what you can do here and what we recommend is you actually put a text box on top of the image. A screen reader can then read the text itself and not bypass anything. Finally, alternative text. You may have heard of alt text. It's very important, and it's actually a legal ramification. Alt text is a must do. You have to include alt text in every email, landing page, anything that you're creating. For your marketing efforts, you have to have alt text. This alt text is what's provided to those screen readers, the magnifiers, to let someone know what the image represents.
Thanks, Cara. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the email operating systems. There's a great article by Litmus that talks about why is email rendering so complex. And in there, it talks about all the email platforms used. Litmus has identified about 1,000 webmail clients around the world, plus roughly 250 mobile email apps. This in and of itself can be daunting when coding for all the things email. So even if we ignore the email clients with the smallest market share and include the necessary webmail browser combos, we should assume that every brand should be concerned with approximately 50 email clients that have reasonable scale in their markets. So let's get you set up with the basics, right? So what is it that's going to help us out when we code? Well, we need to start with the doc type in the HTML. We set this to HTML5 doc type, and not every email client will respect the doc type you set. So someone will remove it and use their own. It's usually still HTML5. So we're kind of cool that way. But there are small rendering differences when they do use an HTML4. And the most common one would be like email devs notice that the TD no longer will display it as a block if you set it as a block element. Language is something you should set. We set the language on this example as English. And the reader to read the text from left to right. However, you can get more granular if you want to. You can set it for EN-GB for British English. And if you're in a situation where you don't know what the language is that you'll be, that the people will read it on, you can set the language to UND, which is undetermined. This can be used alongside the direction of auto to allow the direction to adapt to the language that is assumed. The char set. The char set sets the character encoding standard, which can limit the characters that are used. UTF-8, I feel like, is the the most encompassing, and it covers the most characters and symbols throughout the world. The viewport width will give the browser and email client instructions on how to control the page's dimensions and scaling. The width equal device width sets the width of the page to follow the screen width of the device. And initial dash scale equals 1.0 sets the initial zoom level when the email is first loaded. The user dash scalable equals yes allows the user to adjust the scale, the pinch and zoom that we're so used to now. Format dash detection. This supports low, but it comes in handy for that one problem child that I think we all have when we're coding email, surprise, Outlook, and especially in the iOS app. We don't want the reader to pick up numbers as a phone number by accident. We want to actually explicitly tell it what to do further in the email, that, hey, these numbers aren't random, they're actually a phone number. So we'll just unset that and set it to no. If you've ever had a problem with Apple reformatting your whole email to fit half the screen, we can reset that to tell it to ignore it with the Apple reformatting. And of course, the all almighty color scheme. We can set the color scheme and it's set a bunch of different ways to support Safari and the rest of the world. Light tells the email client only light styles are provided, and dark tells the email client that only dark styles are provided. And then we kind of use the all-encompassing light and dark mode. So generally, our clients like to tell us to code for both, so we know how to do that. And of course, I think this is self-explanatory, setting a title. So I wanted to also include the XML. These are just kind of out-of-the-box things that we need. We need to specifically talk to Microsoft Outlook. And this is a if statement that means this code is only visible to Windows versions of Outlook desktop. Though the T online also renders this, so we'll throw in the no script so it ignores this particular stuff and stops the text 96 showing on the T online. So what does the pixels per inch mean? Well, this will improve rendering on machines that have a higher DPI set. The DPI means dots per inch. And it's often the case for Windows laptops that have higher than standard resolution monitors, or users that have manually chosen to increase the DPI. You can set it yourself. And then you can also style, it's essentially duplicating the meta color scheme that we've already covered, but we're just doubling down on our efforts here. We want to use semantic HTML. So what does that mean? Semantic is, or HTML just means hypertext markup language, and it's important that you use semantic HTML as much as possible. This is a great use of semantics where we're explicitly telling a reader, hey, I'm a header tag. I have an H1, and I'm wrapping my text in an H1 tag. I have a paragraph, and I have an unordered list. So what happens? So the screen reader reads each header out as you progress through the text, right? So it's notifying them what each element is, like a heading or a paragraph, and it stops after each element, letting the reader go at whatever pace is comfortable. The reader can jump to the next heading tag if they want to. Oh, that's a boring title. I don't want to read it. I'm going to flip over to the next one. Kind of gives the reader, like how we scan an email to find things that are important to us. This allows someone to tab through. This might be a little bad case, right? So this is a little different. Same concept. I still have the same block of code, but I'm styling it. I'm coding it out a little different. I'm really wrapping my title text in a span and telling it to a font size. And I'm using breaks instead of using a paragraph tag. And I'm not really putting my Salesforce Pardot Marketing Cloud in unordered lists. I'm actually breaking it, putting a page break in here. So what happens here? Well, the screen reader reads this all in one go, all at once, not giving anyone a chance to kind of tab through the content that's important to them. The tables, well, I mean, we can't always get it through coding out an email. We don't live in a world where a title and a paragraph and an image will do. So we kind of contain our email in tables. And a typical screen reader reads a table as data. So how do we get around that? For a code-happy table maker like myself, this can be super frustrating. A solution here would be to use ARIA, A-R-I-A. So what does ARIA mean? It stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. And it sets the attributes that define ways to make digital content more accessible. Right? So now we have this in a table. I don't want it to read it as a table data. What do I do to prevent that from happening? I throw in an ARIA tag, role equals presentation. That will prevent that from happening. And we kind of use that throughout all of our tables, just in case. So we can do a lot of things with ARIA. I've linked a resource to this deck, but the first rule of ARIA is never use ARIA except for this. Meaning, what do I mean by that? I mean, like the semantic code is the best option. Use that H1 tag, use that paragraph tag, use the ULLIs, and then whenever you can. So there's also another kind of a tip that we can give you, which is another useful ARIA attribute, which is setting your decorative images to ARIA-hidden equals true. And that kind of lets the reader know, hey, these images aren't that important to the message, and just skip over it. These are just for decoration. Another tip that we have is to use legible fonts. What does that mean? Inaccessible fonts can make it difficult to distinguish between shapes and different letters and characters. It can slow the reader down. It can make it hard to separate one letter from another with overlapping characters and letters. They're decorative and include unnecessary adornments. It can get really messy really quick. Our specialty display fonts, such as handwriting style, custom, or cursive. And besides just being flat out the right thing to do, using accessible fonts in your email is the only way you can avoid violating accessibility standards set out in U.S. law. So I provided some known fonts that are actually considered compliant in this slide deck. I want to make sure we use clear language. And what do I mean by that? So instead of using like a 1-2, write out 1-2. It's easier when the reader reads it. Instead of abbreviating November, write out the word November. Expand acronyms at least once during writing copy, right? And then using that ABBR tag to abbreviate or describe them. Like an example would be if you're writing an article about ARIA, or ARIA, explain that ARIA is an acronym for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. Emojis. It's considered to use those sparingly and do not repeat. Keep in mind that emojis actually have an alt text description embedded in them, and they'll be read out loud to the screen reader. So when you have time clock, event starts in 1 week, I know I'm guilty of doing that. Try not to do that. Do not use to replace words. Like don't use come out and party popper with us. That doesn't kind of make sense to a screen reader. Use emoji after the call to action and not before. We want people to get the message first and foremost. So something that you could do is come out and celebrate with us, party popper. Avoid ambiguous emojis that are likely to be interpreted differently by different groups of people. Is the folded hands emoji a gesture of thanks, or is it a gesture of prayer? It can be interpreted both ways. Do not use emoticons instead of emojis. As described before, emojis have an alt text description embedded and can be parsed by the screen reader as text, whereas the emoticons are just a manipulation of symbols and punctuation marks that will actually be read just like that. Punctuation marks. Again, guilty. Use a neutral yellow emoji and avoid dark or light skin color, as it has the best contrast for light and dark mode backgrounds. Coding for dark mode. Why users prefer it? Well, obviously it could just be a color preference. Readability, yeah, you could do it, but I think some say that high contrast of text on a background color is just as important for dark mode as it is for light mode, so do both ways. It could decrease eye strain, of course it can, I think so, and reduce flicker, glare, and blue light. The bright light from our screens is linked to digital eye strain, so I think symptoms like dry eyes and blurry vision, headaches, and sleeplessness can contribute to people using a dark mode. So you might want to start thinking about using it or coding for it. So when you're coding for your emails in dark mode, it can be challenging. There could be different email clients render emails differently. Some email clients will force dark mode and not give you a choice of how to display. Dark mode emails may not always work with your brand styles. Sometimes they're not even better for readability. So you just kind of have to test this out and do a test comparison. Does that PNG background image with the transparent background pop just as well in dark mode as it does for light mode? It's worth the test. Color contrast raises accessibility issues. So same with the text on that dark background mode. Does it still have contrast? And then I did a quick test for us that I included in the slide deck that does a render test of how we can code differently for different color backgrounds. I don't think I'll have time for that today, but to show it. But I'll circle back if we do. I don't want you to curl up in a ball and rocking back and forth in a corner somewhere because you can't get your email to render in dark mode. First and foremost, do a couple of tests and see if your emails are even going to these email clients. Maybe the recipient of that email that you're spending hours on end to try to improve on, it's not even an issue. So I provided a litmus link to the actual email clients where they do support dark mode and some that just do a partial invert, a full invert, or no change at all. So it's worth looking at and reading those. Here are some honorable mention tips. And just some of these are just as important, right? So Cara mentioned the font size is important, but I would say line height in your email code is just as important. Put some proper spacing between your lines of code. Do clean typography. I can't tell you how many times I've seen, I'm going to pick on the sales team. Sales guys just do bold, exclamation, changing out fonts, changing out colors. Keep it consistent. Keep it clean. Don't keep switching it out. Avoid using all caps. You kind of lose the whole purpose of it if you shout out the whole message. Don't underline text. You get confused. Is that a link or is it just underlined text? I mean, I always click an underlined text thinking that's a link. Align text to the left instead of centered or justified. Write descriptive text link. A bad example might be, I think you should read this article and this is your link.
Katie, we have 30 seconds left.
I'm wrapping it up. Right. And I think you should read this article about margarine and article about margarine is the link. And then maintain the logical structure and include a plain text version. I think I actually got through it. Yay!
Excellent.
Yes, thank you so much, Katy and Cara. Unfortunately, we don't have time for a Q&A, but you can find us on LinkedIn or through the chat in Goldcast and ask any questions. Everybody have a great day.